Hi everyone, this is Kim Adelson. I'm really sorry I'm not doing this real time live for you. I just couldn't be here right now, but this is exactly the talk I would have given was I here doing this live right now rather than pre-recording it. And I've been promised that anyone who writes a question in the chat box, those questions will be sent to me and I will get you an answer within the next couple of days. So anyway, I hope you enjoy this talk. This is a topic that really fascinates me and has for many years. So I think nowadays most people, certainly most educated people, can tell you that birds evolved from dinosaurs. But I think that's a very misleading statement. It's misleading for two reasons. One is it implies that birds showed up late, I think, at the end, the very tail end of the age of dinosaurs, and that's not true. And it also implies that birds are different from dinosaurs. It's much more accurate to say that birds are, in fact, living dinosaurs. They are the dinosaurs that survived when most of the other dinosaurs died out. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I want to start off, before we get to dinosaurs, to talk about birds and what makes something a bird and why birds are different from other living vertebrates. So I want to build a case for you that birds really are a distinct group of animals that are not closely related and not similar to any other vertebrate that's alive right now. So the first characteristic that really distinguishes birds from other living vertebrates, and it's in small sentence font because it's not 100% true, it's just mostly true, is that birds have wings. The reason this is only mostly true is there are some birds, like kiwis, without wings, and there are also the occasional other vertebrate, like bats, that do have wings. But 98% of the time, it's really fair to say that if you see a vertebrate with wings, it will be a bird. The second characteristic is that birds have hard, toothless beaks. They evolved these beaks, I'm getting ahead of myself by saying this, but because they're lighter in weight than jaws with teeth are, and birds really benefit from being light. Now again, it's only in small font because there are a few exceptions to this. So for example, though all living birds do have beaks, there are some animals like turtles, vertebrates like turtles, that also have toothless or largely toothless beaks. They've got a little egg tooth at the very front of their mouth when they're first born. See it right here, but that's it. So turtles also have large toothless beaks. And it's also true that not all birds have complete beaks. This is a picture of a black vulture, and you can see that the hard bony part just starts most of the way down, 2/3 of the way down. The top part of its beak is fleshy and skin covered. The reason that's of interest is because that's exactly the case with dinosaurs. That's what many dinosaurs would have had. This is just a fun slide to throw in. Most birds do not have teeth, but there are some birds that have evolved teeth-like structures. They're not similar morphologically to teeth, but they serve the same functions. And so this, believe it or not, I always think it looks like an ant mandible, is the beak of a Colombian hummingbird. And it's got these tooth-like projections, and it uses those projections when the birds fight each other, and hummingbirds are feisty and they fight a lot, to grab and pull out its opponent's feathers. So birds sometimes do have projections, but they're not morphologically teeth. Okay, third characteristic of birds is that they have hollow bones. This is another one that is largely, but not 100% true, because there are some birds like penguins and ostriches and kiwis that don't have hollow bones. So there are some birds that don't have hollow bones. There are no non-bird vertebrates that do have hollow bones. So it's mostly, but not entirely true. Here's a picture, the human bone on the left. You can see it's got very thick walls and it's filled with marrow, whereas the eagle bone on the right has very thin walls and these struts inside, these bony struts to give it strength, and it does not, for the most part, contain marrow. Okay. Fourth characteristic that makes birds different is that they lay calciferous eggs. And you all know what a chicken egg looks like. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Their eggs are brittle, thin-shelled and brittle. Very different, for example, than amphibian eggs, which are jelly-like and soft and squishy, but also very different than the eggs of most other reptiles. Most other reptiles, on the left, what you've got is a white-cheeked tern nest, and you can see its calciferous egg, just what you'd expect a bird egg to be. On the right is a group of python eggs, and you can see how leathery and soft and deformable. You know, it doesn't crack, it squishes much more than a bird egg does. And this is the egg of an alligator. And you can see that alligators have, different than all other reptiles, have a different type of egg. It's actually got two layers, where what it's got is it's got this leathery layer on the inside and a harder layer on the outside. So it actually has a calciferous part, but again, it's not identical to a bird egg, which only has the calciferous part. Okay, well now we get to the last two features, which now aren't just most of the time, they're 100% of the time, okay? So if you find a vertebrate that has, sorry it's covered up on my face here, what I call the miraculous two-way lung, yes, that is a bird. Okay, there's a diagram of this. Let me start by saying birds have really high energy needs. They have very fast metabolisms. They fly long distances without stopping, which burns energy. And some birds fly at incredible heights where the oxygen is really, you know, much thinner up there. So for example, there are some vultures that fly at 37,000 feet, which is high enough to fly over the Alps. So, you know, there's just not a lot of oxygen up there. So birds have to be very efficient at getting oxygen. And the reason I call it the miraculous two-way lung is, well, let me start with people or all other vertebrates. When you breathe in, you fill your lungs with air. Once your lungs are filled, all the oxygen gets used. And when you exhale, you get rid of that carbon dioxide. So you're actually only bringing in oxygen 50% of the time when you're breathing. Birds have this really clever system where they have air sacs attached to their lungs, but that are not made of lung tissue, so they do not absorb oxygen. So what happens when a bird breathes in is air goes into the lungs, and some of it passes right past the lungs and it goes into these sacs. So it absorbs oxygen from its lungs. But when it blows out, now the air from the air sacs passes through the lungs. It's still got all its oxygen. The oxygen is absorbed, and so birds are also getting a shot of oxygen when they exhale. That is by far the most efficient lung system of any vertebrate, so maybe even any animal. So that's a characteristic that really distinguishes birds from any other living vertebrate. And then finally, the last characteristic are feathers, and you all know what feathers are, and it is absolutely true. If you see an animal with feathers, it is a bird. There are all different types of feathers. If I have time, I may come back to that. Now, birds have feathers, and that's what makes them different than other vertebrates, but I also wanted to point out that birds do retain the scales of their reptilian ancestors, and birds actually have two different types of scales. So this is a bald eaglefoot, and you can see that on the top of its toe, it has overlapping plate-like scales, which is what's very common, for example, in snakes. And all the rest of its foot is covered by these pebbly scales, which is more like dinosaur scales. So they do retain some scales, and it's not necessarily only just on their feet. Because here's another picture of a black vulture, and you can see that its head is full of pebbly scales. You can also see it's got a fleshy beak again, okay, with just a hard bony tip. All right, so I hope I have built a case for you that birds really are very, very distinct and different than any other living vertebrate. Okay, so let's now go through these same 6 traits and compare birds to more classic dinosaurs. First off, wings. Hundreds of species of dinosaurs had wings. So again, certainly not all of them, but a lot did. A hard toothless beak. While no dinosaurs had completely hard toothless beaks, lots and lots and lots, including dinosaurs that weren't even closely related to the line that became birds, had partial toothless beaks, just like the vultures that I've shown you just a few seconds ago. Hollow bones? Yes, some dinosaurs did have hollow bones. calciferous eggs. For a long time, it was considered necessary for an animal to have a calciferous egg to be labeled a dinosaur. Recently, relatively recently, they discovered a few ancient, very early dinosaurs that did not have calciferous eggs, but it's still fair to say that a large majority of dinosaurs did have calciferous eggs. A two-way lung? Yes, some dinosaurs had two-way lungs. You can see impressions of those non-lung air sacs in the fossil record. And finally, feathers. Feathers were just really common, really widespread among dinosaurs. They evolved over and over again. So when you compare birds to other vertebrates, living vertebrates, we were 0 for 6. When you compare them to dinosaurs, they're 6 to 6 and out of 6, and that's because birds are dinosaurs. Okay, the hard toothless beaks. This is a recreation of a Stegosaurus, and as you can see there, they've given it a partial toothless beak. Here's a Triceratops to show you it's not just one type of dinosaur. Again, clearly instead of lips, what they had was this hard bony beak at the end of their snout. Here's yet a third type, a hadrosaur. Very impressive, very highly developed, horny, bone-like beak or bill rather than having teeth. So very widespread among dinosaurs to have beaks. And then I love this picture because I grew up going to the American Museum of Natural History in New York, and they have one of the finest dinosaur collections in the world. And about 5 or 6 years ago, they closed for a year and they redid their exhibits to modernize them. And when the exhibit opened again, when you walk in the door, pretty much the first thing you see is this. That's a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and you can see that they have pretty much completely covered him with feathers. And you know, the American Museum of Natural History is as mainstream as can be. I mean, the fact that they've done this really shows that it's just accepted that dinosaurs, many dinosaurs, were covered in feathers. All right, so let's talk about what makes something a dinosaur. If we want to say that birds are living dinosaurs, what makes something a dinosaur? Well, dinosaurs are not any old reptile that lived a long time ago. They're a very specific order of reptiles, okay? An order would be something like primates or carnivores or passerines. You know, it's a type of reptile that has some very specific features. They first evolved about 240 million years ago, which was in the early to mid-Triassic, and the non-avian ones died out at the end of the Cretaceous about 65 million years ago. And so you can see that they were around for a very long time. They were very, very successful. You know, and it was a catastrophe that killed them out. It wasn't that they were slow and stupid and got out-competed by better things. There was a catastrophe that we'll get to later. The characteristic that most distinguishes dinosaurs from other reptiles is the positioning of their legs. And I can show you some pictures of that. Okay. If you look at, this is a Diplodocus. If you look at a Diplodocus and look at its legs look, oops, I gotta get my pointer on. Its legs look very normal to you because they're just like a modern mammal's legs. They're straight down under their body. See, straight down under their body. Let me stop here and say that implies that they were very fast moving. The reason you want legs like this is it allows you to be very, very fast. So it's beginning to be a suggestion that they're not these slow plodding animals that many people think of when they think of dinosaurs. In contrast, this is a velociraptor. Again, you can see its legs are tucked right under its body. Here's an alligator. An alligator has very typical reptile legs in that they're splayed out from their bodies. If you've got splayed out legs like this, you generally can only move pretty slowly, or at best, you can have very short bursts of speed, but it's a very inefficient way to move. You basically have to wiggle your whole body left and right to move, and they're not designed for speed, at least speed at for any length of time. Okay, so, whoops, It's going to back up, but I don't know how on the recording, so I won't. Anyway, that's what you look for to ask whether or not a reptile was a dinosaur. Okay? All right. Now I want to trace how birds arose. Okay? How did you go from any old reptile to bird? So I want to start by, because I always like to start at the beginning, talking about this guy. This is Hylonomus. And Hylonomus was arguably the very first reptile. Okay, so not a dinosaur, look at his splayed legs, but a reptile. And he was the ancestor of dinosaurs and birds. And about 8 inches long, meat-eating, ate insects, insectivore. He lived 315 million years ago, which was about 75 million years before dinosaurs. Definitely not a dinosaur. But what was remarkable about Hylonomus is he was the very first amniotic animal. Amniotic animal means an animal that has a self-contained egg that doesn't have to be submerged in water. If you take an amphibian egg out of water, it dries up and the babies don't hatch. The reason this was such a huge evolutionary advantage, and if he looks a lot like a salamander, it's because in most ways he's not too different from one. The reason this trait was really advantageous is that the world was drying out. At this period, 350 million years ago, the world was drying out. You know, climate change has happened multiple times over the history of the Earth. In part, this one was driven by the fact that the different continental plates, the tectonic plates, smashed into each other, formed one big or two big mega continents, and the inside of continents are always dry. Think of the United States, think of the Sahara. And so the world dried out. The problem that amphibians have is because they have to lay their eggs in water, they can't go very far from water. Okay? They live at the fringes of water. Reptiles, on the other hand, Hylonomus was the first, can travel anywhere they want as long as they can manage to get enough to drink, because they can lay their eggs anywhere. Okay, so Hylonomus was an example of a stem reptile, again about 315 million years ago. And because there had been a mass extinction and the world was drying up and the climate was changing, the stem reptiles, in terms of evolutionary time, really quickly branched out and became 3 very different types of animals. I mean, just in a matter of 5 or 10 million years. So the group that we're most concerned about are the archosaurs. So let me talk about archosaurs for a minute. Archosaurs are the type of reptile that gave rise to dinosaurs and birds. So again, you've got archosaurs about 310 million years ago. They again, you know, differentiated as they spread out and they took over new niches. They differentiated. So they differentiated into turtles, and turtles are actually older than dinosaurs. They also became crocodiles. They became pterosaurs, which are the giant flying reptiles you think of. I'll show you some pictures of those later. And they also became pterosaurs. Pterosaurs were marine reptiles that look a lot like the Loch Ness Monster. Right? If you can think about what the Loch Ness Monster looks like, that's what a pterosaur looks like. And then dinosaurs, in turn, gave rise to birds about 160 million years ago. Okay, or the type of, birds are a type of dinosaur, but a type of dinosaur that showed up 160 million years ago. Remember, dinosaurs died out about 65 million years ago, so you can see that birds coexisted with dinosaurs for 100 million years. It is not that they replaced them at the very end. That's not an accurate way of thinking about it. Okay? All right, I just wanted to briefly talk about the other two groups. The second one to evolve were the lepidosaurs. Lepidosaurs basically became lizards and snakes. They're the ancestors of lizards and snakes. And the reason I wanted to mention this is that I think a lot of people, when they think about dinosaurs, they think they're giant lizards. If you're as old as I am, you can remember old horror movies or old science fiction movies where they took a monitor lizard and, you know, did close-ups of it, and they called that a dinosaur. So a lot of us kind of imagine that dinosaurs were very similar to lizards. But they weren't very similar to lizards. They were more similar to turtles or crocodiles than to lizards. But in any case, lepidosaurs eventually gave rise to lizards, and then lizards gave rise to snakes. Note, it's kind of interesting that snakes are actually a newer type of animal than birds are. Oops. Why did I just have this slide here? I don't, well, just here's a dinosaur and here's a bearded dragon, which is a lizard, again, to show you their splayed legs. Very different. So there are a number of ways that lizards are different than dinosaurs. One is the splayed legs rather than the upright legs. A second is the type of scales. Many lizards have overlapping scales like this. All snakes do, whereas dinosaur skin looks much more like this, these pebbly scales. And the third way, I hope I don't offend anybody, but you really know they're not related to dinosaurs when you see this. I'll go through it very quickly. Is that lizards have two penises. And there's no reason to believe that dinosaurs did. If you look at their pelvic structure, it doesn't seem that they did. So anyway, dinosaurs are not giant old lizards. That's my big point. The last group of reptiles, ancient reptiles that the stem reptiles evolved into are the synapsids. This is Dimetrodon, actually older than dinosaurs. The interesting thing about synapsids are these are the reptiles that eventually became mammals, okay, that evolved into mammals. So again, this is your ancestor back here. The really interesting thing to me about the synapsids is there's more and more evidence coming out that they were probably nocturnal animals. You can tell that by looking at various parts of their eye socket and parts of their brain skull. You know, you can get casts of their brains. It looks like they were nocturnal. The reason that's interesting is the earliest mammals were all nocturnal. In fact, even today, there are more nocturnal than diurnal mammals. So this is one thing that really set them off from lizards and dinosaurs. Didn't compete with them so directly because they were living at night. So anyway, those are the three types. Oh, one more thing about mammals. Again, just have to do this. I just want to say that dinosaurs did not die off because mammals out-competed them. Mammals and dinosaurs lived together for just a huge amount of time, 150 or so million years. And in fact, as long as the dinosaurs were around, mammals were really squashed and kept down. Almost all the mammals that lived during the age of dinosaurs looked sort of like this guy. They kind of looked like a cross between a rat or a shrew or a mouse. And that's how they made their living. They made their living basically keeping out of dinosaurs' way. So they either lived in trees, they're nocturnal, they look like the kind of animals nowadays that are very shy and skittish and hide a lot. And they basically, snuck in and took a dinosaur egg, or they ate insects. But they absolutely did not outcompete dinosaurs. And I'm just saying this because that's another misconception about dinosaurs a lot of people have. Okay, so we're back to the evolution of birds. All right. When you look at the order of dinosaurs, you can divide them in half. There are two suborders of dinosaurs. And most people, if I were to say that, I think would say, yeah, right. You got the carnivorous two-legged type, that walk bipedally, and you've got the four-legged plodding vegetarian type. And that makes a lot of sense that that's how you divide them up, except it happens to be wrong. Whoops. The way you divide up dinosaurs has to do with the structure of their pelvis, the structure of their hips. So you can divide them into the saurischians, which means lizard-hipped, and there are saurischians that are two-legged carnivores and also those that are four-legged vegetarians. And the other suborder are the ornithischians, which means bird-hipped. And again, you've got upright two-legged types, though these guys were vegetarian, and four-legged types. So it has to do with the structure of their pelvis, not so much their overall morphology. And, here's just to show you that they're, you've got different bones in your pelvis and how they're oriented to each other, how big they are. That's what makes a difference. Now, if I asked you, any sensible person, I said, do you think birds developed from bird-hipped dinosaurs or lizard-hipped dinosaurs? You'd say, oh, of course they evolved from bird-hipped dinosaurs, and that's logical but wrong. Birds all evolved from lizard-hipped dinosaurs, and only much later did they then did their hips change to resemble the bird-like dinosaur shape, bird-like pelvis shape. So again, anybody in their right mind would say it the other way, but in fact, they evolved from Saurischian dinosaurs. But which Saurischian dinosaurs, which lizard hip dinos gave rise to birds? The answer is a family of dinosaurs called theropods, or if you want to be Greek, theropodia. A family is, an order is something like carnivore. A family is something like dogs or cats, okay? That kind of size. Pigeons, grebes, pelicans, those are all families. So you're talking about, animals that really are in some ways different, but in a lot of ways quite similar to each other. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about theropods. First off, they are a very old type of dinosaur. They were around from almost the beginning of dinosaurs, and they lasted all the way to the end of the age of dinosaurs. So they were a very successful group. Not only did they last a long time, but there were lots of them. In fact, there are more species of theropods that have been discovered than of any other type, any other family of dinosaur. We have identified at least 1,200 different species of theropods. So again, they were very diverse, very different from each other in lots of ways, but very, very, very successful. The smallest ones were about 3 inches long. The largest ones were about 49 feet long. Many were carnivores, but some were vegetarians. So a very, very diverse group. And it's these guys that are going to give rise to the birds, and they share many characteristics of birds. Birds retain many of the characteristics of their theropod ancestors. Okay, what birds did not evolve from are pterodactyls or pterosaurs. And again, I say this because I know that's a misconception many people have. Remember, pterosaurs aren't even dinosaurs, though they are from that same archosaur branch of the reptile family. Pterosaurs lived about as long as dinosaurs, again, very successful. They could fly really well, but they're not at all related to dinosaurs. They're similar to birds in some ways. They have wings, though the wings are a very different structure. They have a hard, toothless bill, and we now know that many of them were feathered. And this one happens to have teeth. Not all were toothless, but some were. Many of them were feathered. So, there we are. Okay, so let's talk about the ways that birds are similar to their theropod dinosaur ancestors. First off, theropods all had hollow bones. So I don't have that on here, I should. Hollow bones, I can do this in order. The belief now is that the majority of theropods, especially the late theropods, if not all of them, were warm-blooded and active. We now think that most dinosaurs were more warm-blooded and active than most people believe. There's all sorts of converging evidence about this. For one thing, they have very fast growth rates. They grew very fast. That's associated with warm-blooded, not cold-blooded animals. There's all sorts of things like their leg bone ratios, and it gets real technical. But a kind of proof that I really find very compelling is the prey-predator ratio. It takes a lot more energy to keep your body warm than to be cold-blooded. And so if you look at cold-blooded animals, you usually find pretty much a 1-to-1 ratio between the number of prey animals in a given area and the number of predatory animals in a given area. Because the predators don't have to eat that much. You think about an alligator, it eats something big and then doesn't eat for 3 weeks. Or a snake. If you look at mammals, you get about a 10-to-1 ratio, 10 prey for every predator. And if you look at dinosaurs, you get the exact same ratio, about a 10-to-1 ratio. So anyway, there's a lot of reason to believe that they were warm-blooded, that they were active. Not important, but I just think it's a fun thing to say, is their egg colors are the same. If you think about bird eggs, they've got a limited palette. They're white, they're cream, some are sort of rusty spots on them, some are greenish blue, but that's about it. They're not hot pink and they're not bright yellow. We have found dinosaur eggs in every color of modern bird eggs and no colors that modern bird eggs don't have. So they've got a complete overlap in their egg colors, so that's very cool. If you do brain casts from their skulls, they have expanded visual and memory lobes, very similar to what you see in birds. They have three-toed limbs. There's a lot of similarities. I think maybe because I used to be a psychologist, the behavioral similarities I think are really especially nice. So behavioral similarities between birds and other dinosaurs. First off, many are or were highly sociable. We know that. You know that by finding footprints, for example, where it's clear there's 75 different individuals all standing there together. And of course, we know that birds have huge flocks. I like this. In recent years, they've been finding skeletons, fossils of dinosaurs that you can see they're behaving very similarly to birds. So, you know, birds have this particular brooding behavior where they sit on their eggs and they kind of stick their wings out. They kind of raise their wings up and put their wings over the eggs. That's a cast of a dinosaur doing the exact same thing with its eggs. You can see its eggs here, and you can see its arms or its wings covering up the eggs. So you've got that sort of a behavior. Sleeping position, again, you know, many birds from all over, you know, all different types of birds sleep with their head tucked under their wings. It's a very common behavior. There are now casts of dinosaurs. There's the fossil, there's the recreation of it, of the dinosaur doing the exact same thing. And, you know, just a few days ago, I was reading a report that they've now found a very well-preserved voice box of a dinosaur. And if you look at it, it's like a bird's larynx. And so dinosaurs probably didn't roar. They probably chirped and peeped like birds rather than the roar that, you know, you usually see in movies. So that's kind of cool. That's another behavioral similarity. Oh, there it is. There's the reconstructed voice box. And this was not a light little dinosaur. This is one of the ankylosauruses, which, you know, were kind of living tanks. And even it had a very bird-like larynx. And when you know, people who are structural engineers and, you know, anatomists and people who can understand these things look at it, they say, oh, that thing chirped. That's what it did. So that's another behavioral similarity. Okay. So you're never going to remember all of this, but I just wanted to kind of go, how do you go from dinosaur to bird? Well, the order that bird-like traits appeared. Anything in the first line where there's brown is common all over dinosaurs. Many different types of dinosaurs, not just theropods. So feathers, in fact, feathers evolved many times independently. Even pterodactyls had feathers. Legs under the body, that's a characteristic of dinosaurs. And the fact that at least some of them are bipedal, okay? So that's very true all through dinosaurs. You go down to the aqua-colored, and now you're talking about traits that were found very widely, if not 100%, in theropods, okay, the family that dinosaurs came from. Hollow bones, a wishbone, I'll show you that in a minute, a three-fingered hand, that bird-shaped pelvis, the ability to fly, and a pygostyle. Again, I'll get to that if you don't know what it is in a minute. And then finally, the last line, which is gold, these are traits that once you have this trait, you're considered a bird. I mean, this would kick you over into birds. And so it's clawless wings, a keeled sternum, I'll explain that, and a completely toothless beak, not just reduced teeth. So let's go back and talk about some of these things. But anyway, that's what you get. That's how you go from classic dinosaur to bird. Here's the wishbone on the right here. You all know this from turkey dinner. Here's a human clavicle, and you can see that the two halves don't touch. In birds, the two ends are fused together. That's because flying puts a lot of pressure on the joints and on the chest and on the shoulders, and fusing these bones gives them added strength and structural support. So that's a bird-like trait. Here's a pygostyle. This is a rooster, and you can see that birds, even though they look like they have long tails most of the time, that's all feathers. What's supporting it is just this little stump, and that's called a pygostyle. In contrast, here's a dinosaur that's about chicken size, this dinosaur, and you can see that it's actually got a bony tail. You know, the bones go all the way to the end of the tail rather than feathers sticking out of a little stump. And finally, a keeled sternum. This is a dog over here. This is another chicken. Dogs have sternums, breastbones just like ours. It's flat, connects the two halves of the ribs together. Here's a bird. chicken, and you can see that it's much deeper. It's not flat. It's got length to it. And this is again because flying requires large flight muscles. Those flight muscles need something to attach to stick onto. And so birds have developed this keeled sternum. Okay, so that's how you go from classic dinosaur to bird. Let's keep talking about this. Again, how do you go from classic dinosaur to bird? Again, there were lots and lots and lots of small flying dinosaurs. And what basically happened is you had many small flying dinosaurs. I've got a whole talk just on that. But what sets birds apart are features that were designed, I hate to make the anthropomorphic, that gradually let them fly better. Birds are designed to fly. And so their bodies got modified over time to make flight easier for them, more efficient for them. So how do you go from classic dinosaur to bird? Well, they grew lighter. How do you grow lighter? Many bird bones compared to dinosaur bones are smaller and thinner. Again, you get rid of that long bony tail, which is a lot of weight, and you just have a pygostyle and a spray of stiff feathers. You get rid of teeth because teeth are very heavy, so you have a toothless beak, and you get smaller, okay? You get smaller. To put it in perspective, if human beings wanted to fly, you would have to have a 44-foot wingspan in order to lift yourself off the ground. So the smaller and lighter you are, just easier mechanically it gets to fly. Also, there began to be more and more modifications to the arms and chest. Arms and shoulders got stronger, especially relative to legs. If you look at flying dinosaurs, their legs and their wings are about the same length. Of course, in birds, they tend to not, the ones that fly, tend to have very reduced legs and much longer, stronger arms. And again, we already talked about the wishbone and the sternum to support those flight muscles and those joints up there. Okay, feathers also improved. Dinosaurs had feathers, and some had really pretty good feathers, but most had feathers that were not as advanced, didn't function quite as well as bird feathers do. Get rid of that. Okay, now again, the fact that dinosaurs had feathers is, nobody who studies this denies that. You can see it in the fossil record. You can look at that and say, oh my gosh, there are feathers there. And there you are. We don't know if literally every single species of dinosaur had feathers, but we do know that every family of dinosaurs had at least some members that had feathers. So feathers were very, very common, very, very widespread, even in dinosaurs that weren't flying. Here's a Triceratops again. People have studied dinosaur feathers and the impressions they've left, or I should say the impressions they've left. And so we know a lot about them. And one thing we know about them is that oftentimes they were very iridescent, like a hummingbird feather. So bright colors that flashed in the sun. Again, a lot of dinosaurs that we know didn't fly. Oh, there's its beak again. See, toothless beak. That we know didn't fly had feathers, which suggests that feathers did not originally evolve to facilitate flight. They were either for warmth or for brooding or for displaying. We're not sure, but it can't have been for flight because too many dinosaurs that didn't fly had them. So anyway, Triceratops had feathers. We know that. I'm trying to pick dinosaurs that you're familiar with. This is a hadrosaur, duck-billed dinosaur. And this, by the way, was an original bird-hip dinosaur. So this is as far away from theropods as you can get, and it was feathered too. This particular hadrosaur was about the size of a rail and probably filled the same, by where it lived, the same kind of niche as a modern-day rail. Again, this is Keihangjuji, a very, very, very early dinosaur that lived in China. They've analyzed its feathers, and this is exactly what it looked like. Some dinosaurs had very strange feathers, but again, here just another example of a feathered dinosaur, and you can see it has a pygostyle, because remember, some theropods develop pygostyles. Very long, very odd tail feathers on this guy. Um, Birds mostly, modern birds have feathers mostly like this. They also have some downy feathers. Dinosaurs had all these types of feathers, but very few of these. And these are considered, these flight feathers, the best in helping an animal fly. Um, Wings, I just want to show you here really quickly. You know, birds have wings. We all know about that. Um, uh, the pterosaurs had wings, but they're very different. Here, all pterosaurs had an elongated fourth finger, and then there was a membrane of skin that stretched from that elongated fourth finger to their feet, to their ankles. That's how a pterosaur's wings looked like, which is more similar to modern bats. Bats support this skin of their wings on 4 of their fingers, and again are attached at the ankle. So I just wanted to show you another trait that birds have, that flying birds have, that dinosaurs didn't, and it's called an allulia. You see it on this kestrel. It kind of looks like they have thumbs. That helps the maneuverability. That is a bird trait. That is a bird trait. I'm going to skip that because I'm running out of time. I'm going to skip all of this, I think. I'm going to skip all of this because I'm running out of time. I did want to talk about Archaeopteryx, which was for a long time considered the first bird. This was a really significant finding because you can clearly see its feathers. There was no doubt that birds existed, you know, as long ago as they did. Now, I have to tell you, nowadays it's been demoted. If it were discovered today, it would be considered a dinosaur, not a bird. It's got too many dinosaur-like features. It was not a direct ancestor of living birds, but historically it was incredibly important because it was discovered in the 1860s, and this was just about the time that scientists were really discussing Darwin's theory of evolution, and this was considered great proof for the theory of evolution. So, you know, it really hit the press and had a lot of import. Okay. The most common birds during the age of dinosaurs, just to show you, and again, I've got a whole other talk on this, are birds that all died out during the Great Cataclysm 65 million years ago. But these are birds that are not direct ancestors of our modern birds. We know that because their shoulder joints are all wrong. Okay, there's no way that they became modern birds, but they were as good, if you will, as modern birds. They were very successful. They filled all sorts of different niches. You could find them on every continent. Basically, they look like modern birds with teeth. They had horny bills, but there were teeth in them. It's another difference between them. But these didn't make it like the ancestors of our modern birds did. Just another picture of that. I'm running out of time, so I'm doing this. I'm going to skip some of these. The 2 other types of birds, that lived during the age of dinosaurs were these guys, the Hesperonychs, which lived sort of like pelicans or loons, perhaps. And then there was a gull-type bird. For some reason, this is not letting me go backwards, so I can't go back. A gull-like type of bird. But these guys all died out at the Great Cataclysm that killed the dinosaurs. Around 65 million years ago, most of you probably know this, an asteroid slammed into Earth. And when it slammed into the Earth, a lot of things happened. I mean, first off, there was an incredible explosion, 2 million times as powerful as our most powerful atomic bomb. When it did that, when it hit, it created a crater and it kicked up all sorts of dust. It kicked up poisonous gases. Now they're saying, again, this is just this week, they're now saying it's the dust that probably ultimately killed the dinosaurs, but that was kicked up by this asteroid. But it, well, the dust not only poisoned them, but it blocked out the sun for years, and so all the plants died, and so all the animals that depended on plants died. The only animals that survived the cataclysm, 75% of all land animals died, including all of the classic dinosaurs, including those enantiomorphs and the other birds that I just showed you. But a few animals made it. And the animals that made it tend to be, and this is why mammals came into their own, Animals, one that lived under, well, in the ocean. If you were deep in the ocean, you were probably okay. If you lived underground a lot of the time, and most mammals do live in layers, and if you ate bugs and seeds, because seeds lasted. The plants may have died, but their seeds lasted, and then bugs fed on the seeds. And so basically, to survive, you had to be smaller than a house cat. All big animals died, and you had to be a seed eater or an insect eater, and preferably live underground or live out in the water. That would be the other way you could have made it. But that's what killed the dinosaurs, and for a combination of complex reasons, the ancestors of our modern birds made it. I'm sorry I have to skip a bit because I've gone long, which often happens to me, especially hard without an audience to feed off of. But in any case, let me just close this way. I wanted to point out to you that though all the classic dinosaurs died out 66 million years ago, nowadays there are more than 10,000 species of birds. If you compare that to mammals, there are only about 5,400 species of animals. There are also between 200 and 400 billion individual birds. There are only about 130 billion different mammals. Birds come in all shapes and sizes. The smallest one weighs less than 1/10 of an ounce. The largest one weighs 400 pounds. They live all over the place. They live in deserts. They live in the Arctic. They live in the Antarctic. They live in forests. They live in the ocean. They live in swamps. They live in grasslands. What I would like to leave you with is the thought that dinosaurs are still amongst us, and they are still whoppingly successful. They're just a little bit smaller as individuals than you're used to seeing. Thank you. I hope this was interesting. I hope you think you learned something, and I look forward to getting your questions. Bye.